Talk to the listeners here about what are some of those areas that you are thinking that require improvement. Are we talking about from a development standpoint, certain areas? Are we talking about conditioning, like how lean you're getting? What do you think it is for you specifically that you require in order to be at your best, if you will, to compete at Worlds and do well?
That's a great question. I guess if I was to coach myself and go through the nitty gritty of critiquing and fine tooth combing the physique, I would say I need to improve my upper body at this point versus my lower body. Conditioning isn't much of an issue anymore. I wasn't knocked on that the last few times I've got on stage. Usually it comes down to some of the weakness assessment, the lower lat development, thicker lower lats, bigger chest. It's always been my knock, just genetically not favorable, a very arm dominance. If I wanted 20-inch arms and get on stage with nothing else, I can pull that off. The difficulty for me is just torso development, pretty narrow clavicle structure and rib cage, and so getting that up to snuff with the guys I stand next to is a big one for me. I've actually pulled back on lower body training for the first time in, I don't know, forever. I'm a big advocate of lower body training. My gym that I own has a lot of lower body equipment, and it's paid dividends. But I think at this point in my career, I actually need to go down to reducing that frequency and increasing the frequency in the upper body and torso development in order to have a more equivalent physique and maybe hold on to that lean tissue a little better at the very last little bit of prep. Most naturals at a higher echelon, they go from that 10% to 8% to maybe 6 or 5% body fat, and we start grabbing at a little bit of tissue. For me, I can maintain what feels like all my lean tissue and all my strength up until about the single digit body fat, but then we start grabbing at the fullness and size of the upper body for me to get the last little details of the glutes in. So I'm hoping the maturity in the years to come, that won't be the case, and that changing this training style allows that to happen as well.
Interesting. I'm curious, based on what you just mentioned, what's that looking like for you? If you want to share some of those details or maybe give an overview, like a satellite view of what that might look like for the listeners, whatever
Oh,
you're
yeah.
comfortable sharing.
No secrets here. For me, looking at where's this weakness assessment going to be, I find that overall frequency and difficulty of my lower body days does partition a lot of available nutrients and recovery for my lower half. And the more frequent I hit my lower half, the less likely I actually garner the benefit of some heavy upper body training. And I've done a lot of training protocols from 4 to 5 to 6 days a week. However, I've typically kept twice a week lower body training protocol, either a very anterior quad focused leg day and let's say a glute and hamstring posterior focused day, or I'll have one day that's maybe a little bit more compound lifts, a little heavier, a little bit more rest time, and then a day that's a little bit more hypertrophy planned. But that has yielded a lot of lower body development, and I didn't get knocked on that at all this last year. But looking back, I was like, wow, it really was hard, especially during the calorie deficit, to maintain the size and strength of the upper body with how hard those lower body days were. So I've pulled back from 2 days a week to 1 time a week in my lower body, and it's probably been the 7, maybe 8 years since I've tried a protocol like that. I probably did have a little bit more chest, shoulder, and back size at that time for me because I didn't go to this level of lower body training. A lot of my heroes in natural bodybuilding are just incredible athletes, and I really look up to their overall strengths of their compound lifts. And a lot of those are that lower body type of strength and size. So I've really pushed hard in that endeavor with great benefit. But for me, I haven't been able to get my upper body to progress like I would enjoy if maybe I focused on that a little bit more. So that 40-60 split, 3 upper body days, 2 lower body days, or even 4 upper days and 2 lower days that I've done before wasn't sufficient for me to make the progressions in the upper body. So going down to 25% is the new protocol for me.
Okay, so that's interesting. Do you think that it was more so the fact that the lower body days, because you had 2 before, like you had mentioned, from a recovery standpoint, it might have been robbing you a bit, or like to have the resources to maybe contribute to some of that upper body growth? Because the lower body training, if done correctly, as you know, is very demanding compared to anything upper body related.
It sure is.
Yeah, would you say that's accurate as far as what you might have experienced and why you trimmed down to also 1 time per week as well for lower body?
It's been so many years now. I think I really changed around 2011, maybe 2012, when I decided my lower body would be a focal point. And, it's only improved from there. A lot of progressive overload, a lot of tracking my resistances and strengths, and improving technique and form has yielded what I want. But at this point, for me to have more progressive overload in the lower half, it is extremely demanding. So I did kind of come across a couple of years ago some literature that showed we had kind of this bro mentality, I guess, in the bodybuilding world, that there was the upper body bro at the gym, right? The guy who never hit legs, but seemingly had a very impressive upper body. And then there was some literature showing would this individual, if if they were to incorporate more leg training, be able to maintain the level of musculature in the upper body, or would we actually see the potential for the upper body be reduced? And what I read was that actually we didn't see as much development in that upper body when we shared the workload, if you will. And so that really made me think, wow, I don't want to be that guy because I've always had this big ethic for lower body training, but that might actually pay dividends for me. So a big pullback for me now is to say, you know what, let's try 1 day a week legs. The leg work is substantial for that 1 day a week, don't get me wrong, but let's see if we can actually make some progressions in the upper body. And I've only been doing this for a few weeks, but I actually have already seen a little bit more power and strength off of the same calorie count as I did previously when I was doing twice a week of legs. So that's good information for me.
Yeah, no, that's very interesting to know as well, because I'm sure there might be some listeners that can relate to that if they're in a similar spot where their upper body's having trouble progressing, right? And they're doing those 2 leg days per week, and
Yeah,
maybe their legs are not a weak point anymore or ever were, right? Did you have something that you wanted to add there? Sorry, you're kind of cutting in and out, so
that's okay. I just want to say that if there are people out there that are having a hard time with that weakness assessment up top, that they might, if their lower body's up enough, benefit from reducing the frequency and volume there. I know it's for me. I know that's a little bit more of a scarcity in this game for most, but the higher end athletes, the ones who've been at for a couple decades, probably have experienced some of those more advanced difficulties. That's just one, the next obstacle on the list to overcome.
would you say that your lower body is progressing still, or do you find that you're just maintaining with that 1 time per week frequency? Again, you mentioned that it's progressive, and you mentioned that there's a substantial amount of volume there that can contribute to whatever goal you have there. But what would you make of the progress so far as actual development, actual muscle growth?
Yeah, so thus far, the program's new and there's progressive overload. I would say that the likelihood of going beyond where I've been is probably a bit less likely. Might get a little bit more out of it over a long period of time off 1 time a week, but at the rate I was going previously at twice a week in the exercise variety, I would say that I benefit a lot more off twice a week for my lower half. So, hey, if I, breaking it down, looking at myself objectively, if I was to maintain what I brought this last year to my lower half and just bring up my upper, I think I would be a better athlete on stage regardless.
Okay, so it is very goal specific, right? The changes that you're making. And that's important for the listeners to know, because let's say someone's doing a 1 time per week frequency for their legs and they actually want to bring up their legs. Maybe, just maybe, they could benefit from introducing a 2 time per week frequency. At least that's the anecdotes that I've received from many of the guests that I've had on as well, with the exception of a few, to be fair. There's a few high intensity training advocates that we've had on the show, pro natural bodybuilders, that for their whole career, pretty much, they've trained each body part 1 time per week. Like you said, just because you're doing it doesn't mean someone should automatically take what you're doing and implement it for themselves, right?
Yeah, absolutely. It really comes down to sustainability and somewhat enjoyment. You can be pretty hard headed and stubborn like myself and say, regardless of how I feel at the gym, I want to get the work done. But long term, you want to find something that works for you. And I'd say, all of those ways we can skin a cat, if you will. But it can't be something that you're going each day to the gym with a negative mentality of, I really hate this program. Otherwise, I'd say maybe it's time to shift to something that's a bit more enjoyable and that might yield more progressions and just more sustainability.
I like that. I like that a lot.